The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the busy coffee shop near campus. Students filled almost every table, their laptops open and textbooks scattered around. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sound of quiet conversations and typing keyboards. She sat in her favorite corner spot, the one where she could see the whole cafe but still feel hidden away. Her economics book lay open in front of her, but the numbers and graphs seemed to blur together. Math had never been her strong point, and lately it felt like she was drowning in formulas and theories that made no sense. Taking a sip of her lukewarm latte, she tried to focus on the chapter about supply and demand curves. The words seemed to dance on the page, refusing to stick in her mind. She had a test coming up next week, and the pressure was building. Her parents had worked so hard to send her to college, and she couldn't bear the thought of letting them down. Just as she was about to give up and close the book, voices from the table next to her caught her attention. Two young women were deep in conversation, their voices carrying just enough for her to hear. "I swear, moving apartments is the worst thing ever," one of them was saying. She had curly brown hair and was stirring her coffee with obvious frustration. "I thought I was going to die carrying all those heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs." Her friend, a blonde girl wearing a university sweatshirt, nodded sympathetically. "Did you hire movers?" "No way. Too expensive, but you know what? My boyfriend showed up with his truck and 3 of his friends. They spent the entire Saturday helping me move everything. Can you believe that? They even bought pizza for everyone afterward. That's so sweet. Did you do anything special to thank him?" The curly-haired girl smiled, her whole face lighting up. "You bet I did. I cooked his favorite dinner the next day and wrote him this long letter telling him how much I appreciated everything he did. You should have seen his face when he read it. He got all emotional and said nobody had ever thanked him like that before." Her friend leaned forward, interested. "Really, that's such a good idea. I learned it from my mum, actually. She always told me that men need to feel appreciated just like we do. When someone helps you, especially when they don't have to, you should make sure they know how grateful you are. It's not just about saying thanks once and moving on." The first girl continued, getting more animated as she spoke. "Like, think about it. How many times has someone helped you with something, and you just said a quick thanks and forgot about it? But when someone really takes the time to show you they're grateful, it feels amazing, right?" Her friend was nodding enthusiastically now. "My dad always helped my mum with everything around the house, but she made sure to tell him how much she appreciated it, even for small things, like taking out the trash or fixing something that was broken. She'd always say something like, 'Thank you so much for handling that. You make my life so much easier.' And my dad would just beam with pride." Exactly. It's not about being fake or over the top. It's about being genuine. When someone goes out of their way to help you, they deserve to know that their effort mattered. The conversation continued, but her mind had already started wandering. She found herself thinking about someone who had been helping her for months now, someone she had taken completely for granted. His name was Alex, and he was in her calculus class. Actually, calling him just a classmate wasn't really fair. Over the past few months, he had become something like a lifeline for her struggling academic life. It had started simply enough. She had been sitting in the library one evening, staring at her math homework with tears of frustration building in her eyes. The problems might as well have been written in a foreign language. Alex had been sitting at a nearby table, and he must have noticed her distress. He had quietly walked over and asked if she needed help. At first, she had been embarrassed. Here was this guy who seemed to understand everything the professor said, offering to help someone who was clearly struggling, but he had been so patient and kind that she had accepted. That one study session had turned into a regular thing. Every Tuesday and Thursday they would meet in the library after their calculus class. Alex would patiently work through problems with her, explaining concepts in ways that actually made sense. He never made her feel stupid for not understanding something the first time, or even the 5th time, but it wasn't just the tutoring. When she had missed a week of classes because her grandmother had been in the hospital, Alex had shared all his notes with her. Not just photocopies, but his actual notebook, complete with all the little explanations and shortcuts he had written in the margins. When she had been sick with a terrible cold and couldn't make it to the library, he had come to her dorm with soup and spent 2 hours helping her catch up on the work she had missed. Just last week, when she had been panicking about the upcoming midterm, Alex had stayed in the library until nearly midnight, working through practice problems with her, until she finally felt confident enough to go take the test. He had even walked her back to her dorm afterward, making sure she got home safely. Sitting in the coffee shop, listening to the conversation at the next table, she suddenly felt a wave of guilt wash over her. How had she thanked Alex for all of this help, with quick, distracted words mumbled between math problems, a casual thanks here and there, but nothing that really showed how much his help meant to her. She thought about her grades. At the beginning of the semester, she had been failing calculus miserably. Now, thanks to Alex's patient teaching, she was pulling a solid B. More importantly, she actually understood the material. She wasn't just memorizing formulas anymore. She was learning to think mathematically. That confidence had started spilling over into her other classes. The two women at the next table were packing up their things now, still chatting about relationships and appreciation. As they walked away, one of them said something that stuck. With her, it's funny how such a simple thing can make such a big difference in a relationship, just letting someone know they matter. She sat there for a long time after they left, her economics book forgotten. The coffee shop continued to buzz with activity around her, but she was lost in thought. She realized that Alex had been quietly changing her life for months, and she had never properly acknowledged it. He had never asked for anything in return, never made her feel like she owed him. He had simply helped because he was a kind person who saw someone struggling. But now she understood something she hadn't before. Just because someone helps you without expecting anything back, doesn't mean you shouldn't show them how much it means to you. In fact, maybe that made expressing gratitude even more important. The women's conversation had opened her eyes to something she had never really thought about before. She had always been raised to say thank you, of course, but this was different. This was about really seeing someone's efforts and making sure they knew their kindness had made a real difference. As she finally packed up her books and prepared to leave the coffee shop, she made a decision. Alex deserved to know how much his help had meant to her, and she was going to find a way to show him, not just with words, but with actions that would demonstrate the depth of her gratitude. She had no idea yet what she would do, but she knew it had to be something meaningful, something that would let him know that his months of patient help had not gone unnoticed or unappreciated. For the first time in weeks, she felt excited about something other than just getting through her classes. Walking back toward campus, she couldn't stop thinking about what the woman had said about her mother's advice. Maybe there was wisdom in those simple words about making sure people know they matter. Maybe showing genuine appreciation was one of those small things that could make a big difference in relationships. She had a lot to think about, and even more importantly, she had some planning to do. The coffee shop conversation stayed with her for the rest of the day. That evening, as she sat in her dorm room trying to focus on her homework, her mind kept drifting back to what those women had said about showing real appreciation. She found herself thinking about Alex and all the ways he had helped her over the past few months. At first, it had just been the tutoring sessions, but now that she was really thinking about it, she started to remember other moments. Small things that had seemed normal at the time but suddenly felt much more significant. There was that rainy Tuesday when she had forgotten her umbrella and was standing under the library entrance, watching the heavy rain and wondering how she was going to get back to her dorm without getting soaked. Alex had appeared beside her, holding a large blue umbrella. "Need a ride?" he had asked, jingling his car keys. "I'm heading that way anyway." She had accepted gratefully, and he had driven her right to her dorm building, waiting until she was safely inside before driving away. At the time, she had just said a quick thank you and hurried inside. Now she realized he had probably been planning to walk somewhere else entirely, but had changed his plans to help her. Then there was the time she had been sick with the flu. She had missed 3 days of classes and was panicking about falling behind. When she finally felt well enough to check her phone, she found a series of texts from Alex. He had taken detailed notes in all the classes they shared, not just calculus, but also their statistics course. He had even recorded the professor's explanation of a particularly difficult concept on his phone, knowing she would struggle with it. But he hadn't just left the notes in her mailbox or sent them digitally. He had shown up at her dorm with a care package, hot soup from the cafeteria, tissues, throat lozenges, and a thermos of tea, plus all his notes, carefully organized and labeled with sticky notes explaining the most important parts. "You don't have to worry about the homework tonight," he had said, standing in her doorway looking concerned. "Just focus on getting better. We can catch up on everything once you're feeling well." She had been so grateful but also embarrassed about how terrible she looked and sounded. She had managed to croak out a thank you before practically closing the door in his face, too self-conscious to invite him in or have a proper conversation. Now, thinking back on it, she realized how thoughtful that whole gesture had been. Had spent his own money on the soup and medicine. He had taken extra careful notes, knowing she would need them. He had driven across campus to her dorm, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and stood there making sure she had everything she needed. to recover and catch up on her work. And what had she done? Said thanks and closed the door. The memories kept coming as the week went on. There was the time her laptop had crashed right before a major assignment was due. She had been in the computer lab at 11 at night, nearly in tears as she tried to recover her work. Alex had happened to walk by and seen her through the window. He had come in and spent 2 hours helping her recover most of her files, and then stayed even later helping her finish the assignment. Technology always breaks at the worst possible moment, he had said with a sympathetic smile. Happened to me last semester. I know how stressful it is. He had even bought her coffee from the vending machine and shared his bag of pretzels to keep her energy up during the long night of work. When they finally finished at nearly 2 in the morning, he had walked her back to her dorm, carrying her heavy backpack and making light conversation to keep her spirits up. Another memory surfaced from just a few weeks ago. She had been struggling with a particularly difficult statistics assignment, and their study group had fallen apart when half the members had stopped showing up. Alex had noticed her frustration during class and had quietly slipped her a piece of paper with his phone number. If you want to work through those problems together, just text me, he had written. Statistics makes more sense when you have someone to talk through it with. She had texted him that evening, expecting maybe a quick phone call to clarify a few concepts. Instead, he had suggested they meet at the library and had spent 3 hours working through the entire assignment with her, making sure she understood not just how to get the right answers but why the formulas worked the way they did. The more she thought about it, the more examples she remembered. Alex had been quietly making her college experience better in dozens of small ways, and she had barely noticed. Or rather, she had noticed in the moment and felt grateful, but then she had moved on without really acknowledging what he was doing for her. That there was the morning she had overslept and missed the bus to campus for an important exam. She had been standing at the bus stop, checking the schedule and realizing she was going to be at least 20 minutes late when Alex had pulled up in his car. Rough morning, he had asked, and when she explained her situation, he had immediately offered to drive her. He had even stopped at a coffee shop on the way so she could grab a quick breakfast, saying that she would think better with some caffeine and food in her system. During the drive, he had helped her do a quick review of the key concepts for the exam, quizzing her on formulas and definitions while navigating through traffic. She had arrived at the exam feeling calm and prepared, instead of stressed and rushed. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Alex had been consistently showing up for her, helping her succeed, making her life easier, and asking for nothing in return. He never made a big deal about his help. He never mentioned the time and effort he was putting in. He just quietly did whatever needed to be done and then moved on as if it was the most natural thing in the world. But it wasn't natural. She was starting to realize. Most people wouldn't go out of their way like that, especially not repeatedly and without any expectation of getting something back. Alex was choosing to be helpful and kind, and she had been taking that choice for granted. The guilt was starting to feel overwhelming. How many times had he rearranged his schedule to help her? How much of his own time and money had he spent making sure she succeeded? How many of his own plans had he changed to accommodate her needs? And how had she responded? With distracted thanks and then immediately moving on to talk about her own problems and worries. She had never asked him how his classes were going. She had never offered to help him with anything. She had never even brought him coffee during their study sessions. Despite the fact that he always seemed to have an extra drink or snack to share with her, she was beginning to understand what those women in the coffee shop had been talking about. It wasn't just about saying thank you, it was about really seeing what someone was doing for you and making sure they knew their efforts mattered. It was about recognizing that when someone consistently chooses to help you, that choice deserves acknowledgement and appreciation. Thursday evening came, and she found herself sitting in the library waiting for Alex to arrive for their regular study session. As she watched him walk across the room toward their usual table, carrying his backpack and a second coffee that she knew was for her, she felt a wave of emotion that surprised her. This person had been making her life better for months, asking for nothing in return except the chance to help her succeed. He had been patient with her struggles, encouraging during her moments of frustration, and reliable in ways that she was only now beginning to fully appreciate. Tonight, she decided, she was going to start paying attention differently. She was going to really notice what Alex did for her, and she was going to figure out how to show him that his kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. The conversation in the coffee shop had opened her eyes, but now it was time to do something about what she was seeing. As Alex sat down and slid the coffee across the table to her with his usual friendly smile, she realized that showing genuine Appreciation was going to require more than just better words. It was going to require action, planning, and real thought about what would be meaningful to him. But first, she needed to simply start paying attention and being present for the help he was giving her instead of just accepting it as if it was something she deserved. The weekend arrived, and she found herself with something she rarely had these days: free time and a clear mission. For the first time in months, she wasn't worried about catching up on assignments or studying for upcoming tests. Instead, her mind was completely focused on one goal: figuring out how to properly thank Alex for everything he had done for her. She sat on her bed Saturday morning, staring at a blank piece of paper, trying to brainstorm ideas. Just saying thank you wasn't enough anymore. After recognizing the pattern of his help throughout the week, she knew she needed to do something that would really show him how much his support had meant to her. But what? She barely knew anything about his life outside of their study sessions. During all those hours they had spent together in the library, their conversations had mostly focused on math problems and school assignments. She realized with embarrassment that she had never asked him about his interests, his family, or what he liked to do when he wasn't helping her with calculus. This was going to be harder than she thought. She decided to start by thinking about the little things she had noticed during their time together. Alex always seemed tired on Monday mornings, which made her think he probably worked on weekends. He usually had a worn-out backpack that looked like it had seen better days. And she had noticed him carefully budgeting his money, when they occasionally grabbed snacks from the vending machines. But there were other clues too, she remembered. Him mentioning his family a few times, usually when he was explaining why he couldn't meet for a study session. He had talked about helping his younger sister with her high school math homework over video calls. He had mentioned missing his grandmother's Sunday dinners when he couldn't make the drive home. That memory sparked something. His grandmother's cooking. She remembered now a few weeks ago, he had been eating something that smelled amazing during one of their library sessions. When she had commented on it, his whole face had lit up. "My grandmother made these cookies for me," he had said, offering her one. "She always sends me care packages when she knows I'm stressed about exams. These are her famous chocolate chip cookies. She's been making them the same way for like 50 years. He had gotten this warm, nostalgic look in his eyes as he talked about his grandmother. "I swear, nothing tastes as good as her homemade cookies. She has this secret ingredient she won't tell anyone about. I've been trying to figure it out since I was little, but she just laughs and says I'll have to wait until I'm married to learn the family secrets." The cookie had been incredible, soft, chewy, with just the right amount of chocolate chips and something that made it taste different from any store-bought cookie she had ever had. But more than that, she remembered how happy Alex had looked just talking about his grandmother and her cooking. That was it. That was what she could do. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her own grandmother's number. Her grandma lived about an hour away and was always telling her to visit more often. "This could be perfect, Grandma. It's me. I have a huge favor to ask you." Her grandmother was delighted to hear from her, and even more excited when she explained what she wanted to do. "You want to learn how to make chocolate chip cookies? For a friend who's been helping you with school? Oh honey, that's so sweet. Of course I'll teach you. Why don't you come over tomorrow afternoon?" Sunday morning, she took the bus to her grandmother's house, armed with a notebook and a determination to master the art of cookie making. Her grandma had laid out all the ingredients on the kitchen counter and was wearing her favorite apron, the one with flour stains that told the story of decades of baking. "The secret to really good cookies isn't just the recipe," her grandmother explained as they began measuring ingredients. "It's about putting love into what you're making. When you're doing something nice for someone, they can taste the care you put into it." The first batch was a disaster. She had misread the recipe and added too much salt, creating cookies that were basically inedible. Her grandmother just laughed and helped her start over. "Baking takes practice, sweetheart. Don't worry, we have all day." The second batch was better, but still not quite right. The cookies were too flat and had spread out too much in the oven. Her grandmother showed her how to chill the dough first and explained the science behind why that made a difference. "See, the cold dough holds its shape better. Every step has a purpose." By the third batch, she was starting to get the hang of it. The cookies came out golden brown and perfectly shaped, with just the right texture. Her grandmother tasted one and nodded approvingly. "Much better, you're getting it. Now, let me tell you the real secret ingredient." She leaned in expectantly, thinking her grandma was about to reveal some exotic spice or special technique. "The secret ingredient is taking your time and paying attention. Good cookies can't be rushed. You have to care about each step, from measuring the ingredients to watching them bake. When you put that kind of attention into something, people can tell. They spent the rest of the afternoon perfecting the recipe and making several batches. Her grandmother packed up 24 of the best cookies in a decorative tin, along with a handwritten copy of the recipe. Now remember, her grandma said as she was getting ready to leave, when you give these to your friend, make sure you tell him you made them yourself. There's something special about knowing someone took the time to learn something new just for you. On the bus ride back to campus, she held the tin of cookies carefully in her lap and thought about what else she wanted to do. The cookies were a good start, but she remembered what the women in the coffee shop had said about writing a letter. She wanted Alex to understand not just that she was grateful, but specifically what his help had meant to her. Back in her dorm room that evening, she sat down with a fresh piece of paper and started writing. At first the words came slowly. She wasn't used to expressing her feelings in writing, and she wanted to get it just right. She started by listing specific things Alex had done: the late-night study sessions, the careful notes, the rides to campus, the care package when she was sick. But as she wrote, she realized she wanted to tell him more than just what he had done. She wanted him to know how his help had changed things for her. "Before you started helping me," she wrote, "I was failing calculus and feeling like maybe I wasn't smart enough for college. You didn't just help me understand math, you helped me believe in myself again." The words started flowing more easily after that. She wrote about how his patience had made her feel safe to ask questions, even when she thought they might sound stupid. She wrote about how his encouragement had given her confidence to participate more in class. She wrote about how knowing she had his support had made her whole college experience less stressful and more enjoyable. "I don't think you realize how much you've changed my life," she concluded. "You've been helping me succeed not just in calculus, but in believing that I can handle whatever challenges come my way. That's worth more than any grade on any test." Reading over the letter, she felt satisfied that it captured what she wanted. To say it was honest, specific, and heartfelt. Combined with the homemade cookies, she hoped it would show Alex that his months of help hadn't gone unnoticed or unappreciated. As she sealed the letter in an envelope, she felt nervous but excited. Tomorrow was Monday, which meant their regular study session. For the first time, instead of showing up with her problems and homework, she would be showing up with something to give back. She fell asleep that night, thinking about her grandmother's words about putting love into what you make. Maybe that was what had been missing from all her previous thank yous. She had been grateful, but she hadn't taken the time to really show that gratitude in a way that mattered. Tomorrow, that was going to change. Monday morning arrived with a mix of excitement and nervousness that made her stomach flutter. She had barely slept the night before, thinking about how Alex would react when she gave him the cookies and letter. Would he think it was too much? Would he understand how sincere she was being? The question swirled in her mind as she got ready for class. She carefully packed the tin of cookies in her backpack, making sure it wouldn't get crushed between her textbooks. The letter was tucked safely in the front pocket, and she must have checked on both items at least 5 times before leaving her dorm room. Their calculus class seemed to drag on forever. She found herself watching Alex from across the room, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The way he took such careful notes, writing everything down in neat handwriting, how he always raised his hand to ask thoughtful questions that helped clarify concepts for everyone, the patient way he helped the student sitting next to him understand a difficult problem. It struck her that Alex's kindness wasn't something he reserved just for her. He was genuinely a helpful person, who seemed to enjoy making other people's lives a little easier. This realization made her feel even more grateful, but also a bit guilty. Here was someone who was naturally generous with his time and energy, and she had been taking that generosity for granted. When class finally ended, she gathered her things slowly, waiting for most of the other students to leave. Alex was packing up his backpack at his usual careful pace, organizing his folders and making sure everything was properly arranged. This was another thing she had noticed about him. He was methodical and organized in everything he did, which probably explained why he was such a good tutor. "Hey," she said, walking over to his desk. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been for such a simple interaction. "Are you still free for our study session today?" "Of course," Alex replied with his usual friendly smile. "Same time, same place. I brought some practice problems for the upcoming quiz that I think will help." "Actually," she said, adjusting the weight of her backpack nervously, "could we maybe start a few minutes early today? I have something I want to talk to you about before we dive into the math." Alex looked slightly surprised but nodded easily. "Sure, no problem. Want to head over to the library now?" The walk across campus felt both too long and too short. She found herself making nervous small talk about the weather and their professors, announcement about the next assignment, while internally rehearsing what she wanted to say. By the time they reached their usual study spot in the library, her palms were actually sweating. They sat down at the familiar table where they had spent so many hours together. Alex began pulling out his materials as usual, but she stopped him, with a gentle hand gesture. "Before we start studying today, I need to tell you something," she began, her voice slightly shaky with nerves. "Actually, I need to give you something." Alex paused, his calculus book halfway out of his backpack, and looked at her with curious concern. "Is everything okay? You seem nervous about something." She took a deep breath and reached into her backpack, carefully pulling out the decorated tin of cookies. "I made these for you," she said, setting the tin on the table between them, "and I wrote you a letter." Alex stared at the tin for a moment, clearly confused. "You made me cookies?" "Yes," she said, pulling out the envelope and placing it next to the tin. "I realized something this week. Actually, I've been realizing it for a while, but it really hit me when I was sitting in the coffee shop a few days ago." She paused, trying to find the right words. Alex was looking at her with complete attention now, his study materials forgotten. "You've been helping me for months," she continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "Not just with calculus, but with everything. When I was sick, when my laptop crashed, when I missed the bus, when I was panicking about exams. You've been there every single time, and I've never properly thanked you for any of it." Alex started to protest. "You don't need to thank me for ... "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "Please, let me finish. I've been thinking about all the ways you've helped me, and I realized that your support has changed my entire college experience. When I started this semester, I was failing calculus and honestly questioning whether I was smart enough to be." Here she could see Alex's expression softening as he listened. "But you didn't just help me pass my classes. You helped me believe in myself again. You were patient when I didn't understand things. You never made me feel stupid for asking the same question multiple times. You showed up for me when I needed help, even when it wasn't convenient for you." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but she held up her hand. "I know you're going to say it was no big deal, or that you were happy to help, or something modest like that, but it was a big deal to me. Your help has been the difference between me succeeding and failing, not just in school but in feeling confident about my ability to handle challenges." She pushed the tin toward him. "So I learned how to make these from my grandmother yesterday. She taught me her recipe and told me that the secret ingredient is taking time and putting care into what you're making. I wanted you to have something that I put real effort into, something that showed you how much your help has meant to me." Alex carefully opened the tin, and his eyes widened when he saw the golden brown cookies inside. He picked one up and took a small bite, chewing slowly. A smile spread across his face. "These taste incredible," he said softly. "They remind me of my grandmother's cookies. I can't believe you learned how to make these just for me." "There's more," she said, nudging the envelope toward him. "I wrote down some of the specific ways you've helped me, because I wanted you to understand that I've been paying attention. I know I haven't always shown it, but everything you've done has mattered." Alex set down the cookie and carefully opened the envelope. She watched his face as he read, seeing his expression change from surprise to something deeper and more emotional. When he finished reading, he looked up at her with eyes that seemed a little brighter than usual. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "I mean, I knew I was helping you with your classes, but I didn't realize it meant this much to you." "Really?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "You didn't know how much your help was changing things for me?" Alex shook his head slowly. "Honestly, sometimes I wondered if I was being annoying or if you just put up with my help because you felt like you had to. You always seemed so focused on getting through the problems and moving on to the next thing. I wasn't sure if what I was doing was actually useful." This admission hit her like a punch to the stomach. All this time, while she had been taking his help for granted, Alex had been wondering if his efforts were even wanted or appreciated. "Alex," she said, leaning forward earnestly, "your help has been the most useful thing that's happened to me. Since I started college, you've probably saved my academic career, and definitely saved my confidence. I'm so sorry I never made that clear before." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the weight of what had been shared. Alex took another bite of cookie and smiled. "These really do taste like my grandmother's recipe," he said. "She would be so impressed that you learned how to make them just to thank me. She's always telling me that the best way to show someone you care is to put real effort into doing something special for them." "That's exactly what my grandmother told me too," she replied. feeling a warm connection in the shared wisdom of their grandmothers. The conversation that followed was different from any they had ever had before. Instead of jumping straight into calculus problems, they actually talked about their lives, their families, their hopes for the future. She learned that Alex was majoring in engineering because he loved solving problems and helping people build better lives. He learned that she was studying business because she wanted to help small companies in her hometown grow and succeed. When they finally did turn to their math homework, the dynamic felt completely different. Instead of Alex patiently teaching, while she struggled to keep up, it felt like they were working together as partners. She asked questions more confidently, and he explained concepts with even more enthusiasm. Knowing now that his teaching was truly making a difference, as they packed up their books at the end of the session, Alex carefully closed the tin of cookies and tucked it into his backpack along with the letter. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for the cookies and the letter, but for taking the time to really show me that what I've been doing matters. It means more than you know." Walking back across campus together, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The weight of unspoken gratitude had been lifted, replaced by the warm satisfaction of having finally expressed what had been in her heart all along. The weeks that followed felt different in ways she hadn't expected. The simple act of properly thanking Alex had created a shift in their relationship that surprised both of them. Their study sessions became more collaborative and relaxed. Alex seemed more enthusiastic about helping, and she found herself more engaged and confident in asking questions, but the changes went beyond just their friendship. The experience had awakened something in her, an awareness of all the people in her life who had been helping and supporting her without proper recognition. She started noticing acts of kindness and assistance that she had previously taken for granted. Her roommate, Lisa, was one of the first people she began to see differently. Lisa had been quietly making her life easier in dozens of small ways. Since the beginning of the semester, she always let her know when the laundry machines in the basement were free. She saved her favorite snacks from the vending machine when she went shopping. She kept the room extra quiet during exam weeks and even brought her hot chocolate during late-night study sessions. One evening, as Lisa was tiptoeing around the room trying not to disturb her while she studied, she suddenly looked up from her textbook. "Lisa," she said, causing her roommate to freeze mid-step, "I just realized I've never properly thanked you for being such a considerate roommate. You've been going out of your way to help me succeed, and I've barely acknowledged it." Lisa looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, that's just normal roommate stuff. You don't need to thank me for that, but I do need to thank you," she insisted, closing her book and giving Lisa her full attention. "You've been incredibly thoughtful, and it's made such a difference in how comfortable and focused I can be in our room. I really appreciate everything you do." The conversation that followed was one of the most genuine ones they had ever had as roommates. Lisa admitted that sometimes she had wondered if her efforts to be considerate were even noticed. Learning that they were appreciated made her feel valued and encouraged her to continue being supportive. The pattern continued with other relationships in her life. She called her parents that weekend and, instead of just updating them on her grades and complaining about her workload, she thanked them for their constant encouragement and support. She told her father how much his weekly check-in calls meant to her, especially during stressful periods. She thanked her mother for the care packages and handwritten notes that always seemed to arrive exactly when she needed them most. Her parents were clearly moved by her words. Her mother actually started crying on the phone. "Honey, we love supporting you, but sometimes we worry that we're being too pushy or that you don't want us involved in your college life," her mother said through tears. "Knowing that our support actually helps you means everything to us." The revelation that her parents, like Alex, had sometimes wondered if their efforts were truly appreciated was both shocking and enlightening. How many people in her life had been questioning whether their kindness mattered at work? She started paying more attention to her supervisor, who had been incredibly flexible with her schedule during exam periods and had always been willing to explain tasks multiple times. When she was learning new procedures, she made a point of thanking him specifically for his patience and mentioning how much his guidance had helped her grow professionally. "You know," her supervisor said after she had expressed her gratitude, "it's refreshing to work with someone who notices and appreciates the effort that goes into training and mentoring. Most students just expect flexibility and help without realizing it's a choice we make." Even her professors became people she viewed differently. Professor Johnson, who taught her statistics class, had been staying after class to answer additional questions and had responded to her emails promptly even on weekends. She made a point of thanking him after class one day, specifically mentioning how his extra explanations had helped her understand concepts that had initially seemed impossible. Teaching is much more rewarding when students like you take the time to let us know that our efforts are making a difference, he told her with a warm smile. It reminds us why we chose this profession. The ripple effects extended to her friend group as well. She began noticing how her friend Maya always remembered everyone's favorite coffee orders and often surprised the group with treats during study sessions. Her friend James consistently offered rides to anyone who needed transportation and never asked for gas money. Her friend Rachel was always the one organizing group study sessions and making sure everyone had the materials they needed. She started making an effort to acknowledge these contributions specifically, rather than just accepting them as part of the group dynamic. The response was consistently positive. People seemed to light up when their efforts were recognized and appreciated, and the overall atmosphere of their friend group became warmer and more supportive. But perhaps the most significant change was in how she approached helping others. Having experienced the impact of genuine appreciation, she became more motivated to look for ways to support the people around her. When she noticed a classmate struggling with concepts she had mastered, she offered to study together. When her lab partner was having trouble with the equipment, she took extra time to help him understand the procedures. The difference was that now, when people thanked her for her help, she understood the deeper meaning behind their gratitude. She realized that being helpful wasn't just about the specific task at hand. It was about showing someone that they mattered enough for you to invest your time and energy in their success. Alex noticed the change in her approach to helping others. You've become really good at encouraging people, he observed one day as they walked out of their statistics class, where she had spent time helping a struggling classmate understand probability distributions. I learned from the best, she replied with a smile. You showed me what it looks like to help someone without expecting anything in return. But you also taught me something else, how good it feels to know that your help actually matters too. Their friendship had deepened significantly since the day she had given him the cookies and letter. They still met for their regular study sessions, but now they also grabbed lunch together sometimes and had become genuine friends beyond their academic partnership. Alex had introduced her to some of his other friends, and she had started including him in her social activities. You know what's funny, Alex said one day as they were reviewing for their final exams. That day you thanked me with the cookies, and the letter changed how I approach helping everyone, not just you. Really, how so? Well, I realized that I had been helping people but never really checking to see if my help was actually useful or wanted. Now I pay more attention to whether what I'm doing is making a real difference, and I'm better at asking people what kind of support would be most helpful. That's amazing, she said, genuinely pleased that the positive effects had flowed both ways. But there's something else too, Alex continued. Knowing that you noticed and appreciated everything I had done made me want to keep being helpful, not just with you but with other people. It's like your gratitude gave me energy to do more. This insight resonated deeply with her own experience. She had found that when people acknowledged her efforts to help them, it motivated her to look for more ways to be supportive and kind. The semester was coming to an end, and as she looked back on how much had changed since that day in the coffee shop, she felt amazed by the power of such a simple concept. Properly expressing gratitude hadn't just improved her relationship with Alex, it had transformed how she saw and interacted with everyone around her. Her grades had improved significantly, but more importantly, her relationships had become deeper and more meaningful. She felt more connected to her family, closer to her friends, and more confident in her ability to build positive relationships with new people she met. The experience had taught her that gratitude wasn't just about being polite or following social expectations. It was about truly seeing the people who made her life better and making sure they knew their efforts were valued. It was about understanding that behind every act of kindness was a person who had chosen to help, and that choice deserved recognition. She prepared for her final exams. She reflected on how different her college experience might have been if she had never overheard that conversation in the coffee shop. She might have continued taking Alex's help for granted, missing out on a wonderful friendship. She might have remained blind to all the ways people were supporting her daily life. But now she understood something that felt like a fundamental truth about human relationships. Everyone wants to feel appreciated. Everyone deserves to know when their efforts make a difference. And taking the time to express genuine gratitude creates positive changes that extend far beyond the original gesture. The simple act of learning to say thank you properly had changed everything, creating ripples of positivity that touched every relationship in her life and made her a more caring, attentive, and grateful person.